Hey, this is Brandon again, coming to you, talking about the connecting of the 21st century church to God's heart for Jerusalem. We've been talking about the beginning of sorrows, and we've been talking in the last sessions concerning what season on God's calendar, God's timetable, Jerusalem is entering in. And we've shared in the last clips, this is session 7, how that God is getting ready to bring a shaking to that region, and particularly from Zechariah 1, the vision I saw of the red horse, the riding of the red horse representing the judgment of war, and how that was confirmed in Jerusalem, a dream, and then afterwards God confirmed it on the 24th day of the 11th month, just like Zechariah 1 says, that the nations came together to ease the sanctions against Iran concerning the enrichment of uranium that makes nuclear weapons. And on that 24th day of the 11th month, just like Zechariah 1 says, Benjamin Netanyahu stated that we will preemptively strike to keep Iran from making nuclear weapons. And we declared that these are the beginning of sorrows, or that time when war comes to Jerusalem. In Matthew 24, Jesus says, these are the beginning of sorrows. And during the time of the beginning of sorrows, God is going to raise up Isaiah 40 comforters. Isaiah 40 comforters that says, comfort ye, my people. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem that her warfare is accomplished, or is coming to an end. It's come to an end. The voices of those crying in the wilderness. And so we shared how the beginning of sorrows speaks specifically about the turning of the hearts of God's people back to Him. Matthew 24 lists all the signs of the coming of the Lord. It lists the signs of the end of the age, being the temple being torn down, and how that's not completely been fulfilled. God showed me that wall in Jerusalem, it still has stone stacked on another, and so that vision or that prophecy has not completely been fulfilled, with stone being torn down and not one stone left upon another. But he says all of the signs, wars and rumors of wars, these that come at the end of the age, that is coming during the time of the riding of the red horse, and that's coming as a shaking to Jerusalem, is the beginning of sorrows, or the beginning of God turning their hearts back to Him. We said that 2 Corinthians 7 talks about sorrow, the sorrow of God. Godly sorrow works repentance unto salvation. And so when we talk about the signs of Matthew 24, and then the 8th verse that says all these things at the beginning of sorrows, we're actually talking about the beginning of the turning of the hearts of God's people, or the salvation of all of Israel. And so what is that salvation, and what is that message that voices of comfort will speak during that time? Well, that message that voices of comfort will speak during that time, and those that are in the wilderness of tribulation will speak during that time, is actually Matthew 24:14. This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached. Now, when we see these words, and this gospel of the kingdom, most people in Christianity today, especially those in the West, we have made that to be a gospel that's preached to all the world concerning, a kingdom message that we have formulated. This is the message of the kingdom. And, we've had good messages concerning the kingdom taught in our generation. But in this verse, it's speaking specifically of the gospel or the news or the revelation that Jesus is sharing with his disciples about the end of the age. So he's talking about the signs of the coming of the Lord. He's talking about the signs of the end. He's talking about wars and rumors of wars. And specifically, he's speaking about what's going to happen at the end or after the tribulation. The verse in Matthew 24:29, it says, immediately after the tribulation in those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon shall not give her light. Then shall appear the Son of Man in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven, and the power of God with great power and great glory shall he come. And so it's actually speaking of the gospel of the coming of the Lord, or the gospel of the end of the age and the salvation of Israel. This gospel is going to be preached in all the world. In the midst of sorrow, in the midst of tribulation, God's going to raise up voices in the wilderness crying out. You know the verse that we speak in the West, speaking of the rapture, 1 Thessalonians 14:18, it says, comfort one another with these words. These words in Matthew 24:19 are the same depiction, the same representation of the rapture listed in 1 Thessalonians 4:15, talking about the trumpet being sound, the angels blowing the trumpet, and the Son of Man in heaven appearing as a sign, and the gathering together of the saints. God is going to bring them out of the midst of the trouble and the tribulation and the attack of the nations. He's going to catch them away out of the midst of that, and then he's going to fight against their enemies himself. And this gospel is what he's speaking of, will be preached. Then the end shall come, when we actually prophesy the coming of the Lord in the midst of tribulation to save his people out of their sins, and out of the judgment of war, and out of the judgment of the surrounding events concerning the end of the age. Then the end shall come. Then Jesus will come. And so I want to stop here. I just want to, wrap this up, but I want to inform you and let you know that we're meeting every Saturday, and we're talking about God's heart for Jerusalem, having interest meetings in Gahanna at 81 Mill Street, Gahanna, Ohio. We'll be meeting every Saturday at 6 p.m. And we're having these interest meetings for the launching of a house of prayer to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. That watchmen will be raised up on the wall to give him no rest until he makes Jerusalem a praise in the earth. And we thank you for coming that came last week. We had about 25 people that came and heard the message and expressed their interest in being a part. And so if you are available Saturday night at 6, we want you to come, and we want you to hear more on this message and more on the end of the age and the coming of the Lord and the raising up of watchmen and God's house of prayer to give him no rest until he makes Jerusalem a praise in the earth. God bless you. We'll see you next.